Welcome everyone to today's meeting, Famagusta, from tragedy to opportunity. My name is David Burrowes. I'm a Member of Parliament for Enfield Southgate. I'm also the chairman of the Cyprus all-party Parliamentary group. This meeting is particularly organised by the Famagusta Association of Great Britain and Lobby for Cyprus, and we're grateful for them for the organisation of today's event. There are a large number of people here. We have a distinguished panel who I'll introduce shortly. We have also some guests, particularly welcome Marina Kyriakides, member of the European Parliament. Thank you very much for coming. It's excellent to have you with us. We have other parliamentarians. I can see Theophanous, Member of Parliament for Hendon, who's with us, and other parliamentarians will be joining us through today. It's the last day of the Queen's speech, and so there's a number of people who are taking part in that debate in Parliament. But it's excellent to be here. There are a large number of people here. If you're interested in how many Famagustans? Hands up, number. Fantastic. Well, you're particularly welcome, and that says a lot in itself. That a large number of you are here, also representing families and generations, and you're extremely welcome, particularly, as well as those who are not from Famagusta as well. And I think the context of this debate is to ensure that we hear a number of voices, and so I welcome you all here. If people could turn off their mobile phones so that we're not interrupted by the phone or any other communication systems. And we'll also make sure that we hear from our panel, and then we'll be opening. I want to hear from those who are gathered here. And we want to, in this Parliament, we welcome free exchange of views, indeed differing views as well, but we also want to ensure that everyone treats everyone with respect and listens to each other carefully, and I'll call you to order if you're not showing those principles of respect, but I'm sure I will need to do that. But firstly, I'd like to particularly welcome our panel here. I'd like to particularly welcome Galanos from Famagusta. Thank you very much for coming. Welcome Dr. Klearchos Kyriakides, Senior Lecturer in Law. Also welcome Andreas, Theophanous, Professor of Political Economy. And finally, Mark Stevens, well-known human rights lawyer, also very welcome as well. Our speakers could speak for a long time on these subjects, but I've asked them to confine their words to a maximum of 15 minutes, and I'll be holding them to account on that time as we go through, and then we'll be able to have a good time for discussion. So, can I first of all invite Dr. Klearchos Kyriakides, Senior Lecturer in Law, to open the discussion.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It's both a pleasure and an honour to contribute to this seminar. At the outset, I must thank the organisers and also Mr. Burrowes for kindly chairing. By reading Hansard, I understand that the Parliamentary estate shares something in common with the Famagusta district of Cyprus. Both are rather well endowed with fig trees, as well as olive trees. So the Mayor of Famagusta should feel quite at home today. Before I press on, I should stress that the views expressed in my talk are mine and should not be interpreted as those of the organisers, my university or any other person or body. I should also declare an immediate interest. My late paternal grandfather hailed from Lisi, a village within the Turkish-occupied part of Famagusta district. We are gathering here at a pivotal moment in history. To begin with, the Eurozone crisis is entering another dangerous phase, and the eye of the storm is in Greece, the birthplace of democracy, and a country which is supposed to be one of the three guarantor powers of the Republic of Cyprus. It can't guarantee to repay its own debts, so how on earth is it going to guarantee the Republic of Cyprus? And I picked up The Guardian, which has a picture of the Acropolis on the front page, and it tells us that governments are preparing for the worst as the massive cost of the likely Greek euro exit emerges. Further afield, the Arab Spring is still unfolding with uncertain implications for Tunisia, Libya, Egypt, Syria and their neighbours. It remains to be seen as to whether the Arab Spring descends into an Islamist winter. In the meantime, it may be no coincidence that with each passing day, the remnants of Christianity in the Greater Middle East are being depleted. In the words of the Archbishop of Canterbury, at the present moment, the position of Christians in the region is more vulnerable than it has been for centuries. With this background in mind, I will now try to place the fate of Famagusta into some sort of historical and legal context. Did you know that the distance between the frozen war zone of Famagusta and the active war zone of Homs in Syria is less than the distance between London and Amsterdam? This small detail illustrates a stark juxtaposition. On the one hand, the Republic of Cyprus is legally subject to the same democratic norms, values and European Union legal framework as the United Kingdom, the Netherlands and other EU partners. Yet on the other hand, the Republic remains geographically and to some extent psychologically part of the Eastern Mediterranean and the Greater Middle East. All of which brings me to my central argument. Since biblical times, a constant theme of the region has been the wielding of raw, unrestrained power, often by European or local governments and their armed forces. A related theme of Eastern Mediterranean and Middle Eastern history has been the forced or constructive expulsion of people from their homes, businesses and properties. If the book of Exodus provides an insight into these practices in the biblical past, early 20th century history is replete with more recent examples which form the backdrop to what happened to the citizens of Famagusta and other citizens of the Republic of Cyprus of all racial and religious backgrounds. Think of the expulsion of the Armenian and Greek Orthodox Christians from Asia Minor prior to, during and immediately after 1922. Think of the expulsion of the Turks, the Turkish Muslims I should say, from Greece following the 1923 Greek-Turkish Convention. Think of the expulsion and extermination of the Jews at Thessaloniki and other parts of Greece during the Second World War. In common with the citizens of Famagusta in 1974 and other Cypriots of all backgrounds, all of these people were at the mercy of a government and its armed forces without any protection from independent courts. Accordingly, all lost their homes, properties and businesses, if not their title, in the case of the Famagustans, without the due process of law. And worst of all, perhaps, they were all targeted for the very simple reason that they belonged to a particular religion, be it Christianity, Judaism, Islam, or other. Thanks in large part to the United Kingdom, the United Nations responded to the defeat of Hitler by championing the rule of law. Thus, in the immediate aftermath of the Second World War, we saw the emergence of the United Nations Charter, the Genocide Convention, the Geneva Conventions, the European Convention on Human Rights, and the International Convention on the Elimination of all forms of racial discrimination. These treaties and others were designed to prohibit many of the practices associated with the pre-1945 period. As such, they sought to promote religious tolerance and protect as well as empower civilians. Needless to say, as Greece is discovering to its cost today, it's one thing to introduce laws and identify values on paper. It's quite another thing as to whether those laws and values are translated and honoured in practice. Turkey is bound by the legal principles and rules embodied within the aforementioned treaties. Nevertheless, when the armed forces of that country invaded the Republic of Cyprus in 1974, they showed scant regard for the law or for the rights of citizens. The primary evidence, among other forms of evidence, lies in the fact that 40,000 or so citizens of Famagusta were driven or constructively ousted from their homes and businesses without any due process of law, and they had been prevented from returning, all because of their religion. By the same token, there were Turkish Cypriot citizens who were herded north of the ceasefire line because of their religion. In combined consequence, Turkey not only occupied the northern areas of the Republic, including Famagusta, Turkey managed to de-Christianize and colonize those areas in violation of the Geneva Conventions, while procuring de facto, though not de jure, partition and religiously based segregation. Greek Cypriots south of the line, Turkish Cypriots north of the line. I'm reminded of the memorable words of the late Dr. Martin Luther King in his letter from Birmingham jail, dated 16th of April 1963. Segregation ends up relegating persons to the status of things. Hence, segregation is not only politically, economically and sociologically unsound, it is morally wrong and sinful. All that being said, as we know, Famagusta was marked by two anomalies following the invasion. Firstly, the fenced-off area was not populated, and secondly, a pocket of Greek Orthodox Christians in the Galanos Peninsula, within Famagusta district and just a few miles from the town itself, did not flee from their homes and properties, or at least not all of them did. They stayed put, yet rather like the Greek Orthodox inhabitants of Istanbul or those of Alexandria, they have been subject to various forms of direct or indirect discrimination. And I must at this point cite the observations of the European Court of Justice in the case of Cyprus and Turkey from 2001. The court concluded that those residents of the Galanos Peninsula had their rights under Article 3 of the European Convention violated by Turkey. Under Article 3, no one shall be subjected to torture or to inhuman or degrading treatment or punishment. And according to the judgment, and I quote from the court here, it is an inescapable conclusion that the interferences at issue were directed at the Galanos Greek Cypriot community for the very reason that they belong to this class of persons. The treatment to which they were subjected during the period under consideration can only be explained in terms of the features which distinguish them from the Turkish Cypriot population, namely their ethnic origin, race and religion. The conditions under which the population is condemned to live are debasing and violate the very notion of respect for the human dignity of its members. In the court's opinion, with reference to the period under consideration, the discriminatory treatment attained a level of severity which amounted to degrading treatment. All of which is rather sad, but in keeping with the history and the culture of the Eastern Mediterranean. Now, there is a British interest in all of this. For a start, the fate of Famagusta represents an affront to fundamental British values, notably the rule of law, about which the late great Lord Bingham wrote so eloquently in the book that he wrote shortly before he died. I encourage everybody to read both the book of Lord Bingham and the collected works of Martin Luther King. Besides that, the United Kingdom continues to regard itself as being under a lingering legal duty to recognise and guarantee the independence, territorial integrity and security of the Republic of Cyprus. And the shabby state of Famagusta represents a constant reminder that the United Kingdom must do more to fulfil this duty. No less importantly, British national interests and British expeditionary strategy are engaged by Famagusta. Under the Treaty of Establishment in 1960, the town contains 2 sites which have been retained by the United Kingdom but are not presently occupied because of the de facto partition. By the same token, Famagusta has a port which in legal theory Royal Navy ships have a treaty right to enter. On top of all of that, Famagusta is just 4 or 5 miles away from the Signals Intelligence Station at Ayos Nikolaos, which is an integral part of the British Overseas Territory. Within that British Overseas Territory, one finds a British Ofsted-regulated primary school, together with an associated British military community. So there is a fundamentally important British strategic interest in keeping a watchful eye on Famagusta. And in the words of the Defence Secretary of this country, Mr. Hammond, last year, the sovereign base areas are in a region of geopolitical importance and high priority for the United Kingdom's long-term national security interests. And remember, the expeditionary operations in relation to Iraq, Afghanistan and Libya have all hinged upon the sovereign base areas, as well as the cooperation extended by the Republic of Cyprus, as well as the cooperation extended by Egypt. It's time, ladies and gentlemen, to draw some conclusions. I should have addressed the chair, Mr. Chairman. It's time to draw some conclusions. The most obvious one is that everybody in the Eastern Mediterranean should no longer behave in a way that harks back to the pre-1945 era. If anything connects the economic calamity which has befallen Greece, the bloodshed inflicted in Syria, and the indignity suffered by the citizens of Famagusta, it is the failure of states and citizens to observe the rule of law and the principles of ethical conduct. Looking to the future, a huge effort, I would call it a Marshall Plan in the field of education. A Marshall Plan is needed across the Eastern Mediterranean and beyond. The efforts must deliver public education, it must nurture civil society, it must encourage religious tolerance, must promote equality, one of the foundations of the rule of law. It must attack discrimination wherever it is found, and it must foster ethical conduct in both the private and the public spheres. It bears emphasising that the European Union, whatever its flaws, and it has many, and I'm a mild Eurosceptic in British political terms, whatever one thinks of the European Union, it is founded on the rule of law and related values. Under the preamble to the Treaty on the European Union, which binds the United Kingdom, Greece, Cyprus, and should bind by extension aspirant members such as Turkey. The European Union is founded on the universal values of the inviolable and inalienable rights of the human person, freedom, dignity, equality and the rule of law. The citizens of Famagusta, including those who are here today, are entitled to the protection afforded by those values. Turkey must act accordingly, must honour its obligations and obey the law. Turkey's made significant strides in that direction, but it has not gone far enough. And regrettably, on occasion, it tends to behave in a manner that combines the very worst authoritarian aspects of Ottomanism, Kemalism, militarism, and now Islamism. For all of those reasons, I've campaigned against de facto partition, against de jure partition, and also against the de jure carve-up of the Republic into a religiously based bi-zonal, bi-communal federation, which entrenches discrimination against Greeks in the north and entrenches discrimination against Turks in the south, and would, as a consequence, entrench discrimination against anybody who is neither Greek nor Turkish. And we are living, ladies, Mr. Chairman, we are living in a moment when more than 20% of the population of the Republic of Cyprus is neither Greek Cypriot nor Turkish Cypriot. Those of you who've been to Nicosia or Larnaca or Limassol recently would have seen that the streets of those towns resemble the streets of London. They no longer resemble the Cyprus of 50 or 60 or 70 years ago. So I will leave you with this thought, ladies and gentlemen. It's no longer possible, it's no longer permissible in law for Famagusta to be treated in this way, and for the citizens, to borrow the magic phrase of Martin Luther King, to be treated as things. They are citizens, they are entitled to human dignity, and they are entitled to the protection of the fundamental rights which the European Union has bequeathed to them. History shows, you might say, that this is all pie in the sky. This has been the state of affairs since biblical times. We can't change it. But history shows that it is possible to change the law, and it is possible to change attitudes, cultures and practices as well. That is why, 44 years after the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King, Barack Hussein Obama is seeking re-election as the President of the United States. Perhaps, therefore, the last word ought to be left to the late Dr. King. We must either learn to live together as brothers, or we are all going to perish together as fools. Thank you.
Because he's an old school friend, I gave him an extra minute. Mr. Jonas, but thank you very much. Can we swiftly on to Andreas Theophanous, Professor of Political Economy. Indeed, he will address us on the political economy of the maternal defence area of Famagusta.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, I would also like, before I share with you thoughts and perspectives on this issue, to thank the organisers for giving me this opportunity, and I really feel honored. This meeting comes at a time that again we have a new deadlock in the Cyprus question. And the question is, how do we move forward? Certainly, in the event of the return of Famagusta to its inhabitants under UN before under the Republic of Cyprus control, benefits would be great, but it's important. I think this is self-evident, but it's important to see the issue in a comprehensive manner. What would be the implications? What are the chances? And so on and so on. I would first talk about the historical context and background of the discussion about Famagusta, then move to the potential economic benefits from the return of the fenced city of Famagusta, and then discuss the issue beyond the return. What is the potential political impact of such an event? And then I will close my presentation with some remarks about the way forward. You may recall, most of you, that following the Turkish invasion in 1974, for those of us who remember the headlines of newspapers in the fall of 1974, many times it was put forward that the return of Famagusta was imminent as a first step towards confidence-building measures between the two communities, and as a first fundamental move towards a breakthrough in the Cyprus question. I remember that, I remember that repeatedly. So it was also included in the second high-level agreement in 1979 between President Kyprianou at the time and the Turkish Cypriot leader Rauf Denktaş, that with the return of Famagusta would take place with the beginning of negotiations between the two communities. Now, this was put forward repeatedly, but nothing in reality took place. 1983, following the unilateral declaration of independence by the regime in the north, which was condemned, the UN followed its resolution in 1948, which again called for the return of Famagusta. So there was pressure. And again, following the failure of the attempt under Boutros Ghali to pursue successfully the set of ideas in 1992-93, again we came back with the idea of the issue of Famagusta as part of a CBM package to see how there could be a breakthrough in the Cyprus question. The whole idea was that there would be tangible benefits for all parties involved, and at the same time there would be the creation of the political will to move forward. That was the central idea. Again, following the rejection of the Annan Plan and the deliberations in relation to enhancing Turkey's accession negotiation process, again Famagusta was in the headlines. Now, I would say the following in relation, having mentioned that 3-4 times the issue of Famagusta was brought forward, I would say that traditionally, following 1974, the position of the Greek Cypriot side was that there would be a comprehensive solution of the Cyprus problem. For those of us who speak Greek, they said we should avoid amokustopisi του Κυπριακού, meaning that we should avoid dealing only with Famagusta and forgetting about everything else. At the same time, the Turkish side said, let's take it step by step. They wanted to focus on CBM. But it's important to see, although that they were saying that they wanted CBMs, in reality, they would never honor whatever was agreed. For example, there was an agreement in 1975, an agreement in relation to Cartasia, the Third of Vienna, that the Turkish side never really implemented. And there is something, and there is something else that we must point out. Although the Turkish side in the 70s, when it was under extreme pressure, they pretended that they would be eager to discuss Famagusta. Nowadays, what do they say? That there would be CBMs, but the fancy city of Famagusta would be returned only within the framework of a comprehensive Cyprus solution. It's very important to keep this in historical perspective and the political implications of this. Now, we saw that on April 23rd, 2003, the Turkish side moved unilaterally to partially lift some of the restrictions to the free movement of people along both sides of the Green Line. That was a step that attracted international attention. The Republic of Cyprus followed a week later with substantive measures, openings towards the Turkish Cypriot community, as community and as individuals, but the impressions at the time were won by the Turkish side, by the side of the Turkish occupation regime. Now, coming back to the issue from Famagusta. Right now, there is in the theory of conflict theory the view that really it's very difficult sometimes after a protracted struggle to have a comprehensive solution to all the problems involved. And sometimes theoretically, the issue put forward is that if it is possible to start with some conflict-building measures and also some mutual steps, then there will be benefits and also the creation of political will so that you move forward in a gradual and evolutionary process towards a comprehensive solution. And I think this today acquires greater importance. Why? We have a new deadlock in the Cyprus question. The Republic of Cyprus is getting ready to assume presidency of the European Union. There is a roadmap, but it's getting ready. EU-Turkish negotiations, accession negotiations, are not going anywhere. So the issue again, what do we do? It has been put forward again in the press that the Turkish side may be thinking to allow the return of defense, to allow the inhabitants of the defense city of Famagusta, but under Turkish Cypriot control. I think that would be very problematic. But let me, before I go to that, try to explain the potential benefits of a proper return of the first city of Famagusta, either under the UN auspices or even directly under the Republic of Cyprus. There would be reconstruction, houses, buildings, infrastructure, the sewage system, telecommunications. I think that at least we would need about 6 billion euros for the initial stages of reconstruction. Where that money would come from? Come from state money, private money, EU funds, and foreign investment. I think that this would be the first series of spending. Now, this in itself, it would release much higher spending. It would involve job creation for Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots. We are going to have the port of Famagusta functioning in a legitimate manner and in a way that it would lead to an expansion of business. And I think the economic benefits of the reconstruction of Famagusta would have a spillover effect throughout the island. I dare say that it would be the beginning of a new economic miracle. I'm talking, you may recall the economic miracle of the reconstruction that took place after 1974. I think if we have such a process, it would be a very fundamental, big step forward. And it would not be only economic. It would be beyond that. There would be a great political impact. The issue is that, understandably, for this to take place, it must take place within a comprehensive CBM, a fundamental CBM package. Perhaps it may involve opening some chapters in the negotiations between EU and Turkey, namely the energy chapter, and also it would be a very fundamental step forward in the beginning of a normalization process in the relation between the Republic of Cyprus and Turkey. And then come to that, the implications of that if it were going to take place. Now, I try to talk about the positive scenario, but there is another scenario which may not be so positive. In the event that the Turkish side decides to move on with the opening of the first city of Famagusta under Turkish Cypriot administration, I'm afraid under these circumstances we may have confusion, disunity, and legal complications. Under these circumstances, understandably, some Greek Cypriots would say, we would like to return no matter what. It is understandable. We have to understand it. Another number of Greek Cypriots would say, we are not prepared to return under Turkish Cypriot administration. And there would be some others who would be willing to solve their problems. And again, this would raise the issue of, it would raise the issue of legitimacy. It would raise the issue of what is the next step. And under such circumstances, it would be, the reconstruction process, it would be much more difficult. In the first scenario, I painted a very positive picture saying about the 6 billion that will come in one way or another. In the second scenario, I think it would be much more difficult for this to take place. And in such a case, the politics of the Cyprus problem will become even more difficult in this scenario. The question is, how do we move forward? I think I have no doubt in my mind that, and let me talk about the substance of the Cyprus problem, because we have been used to bilateral negotiations as if the major dimension of the problem are the relations between the two communities. I will not deny that the relations between the two communities, the past, the present, and the future, it's a major dimension. But it is not the most important dimension. There are two issues that we must never forget. The fact that Turkey occupies almost 40% of the Republic of Cyprus. And second, and perhaps this is even worse, Turkey does not recognize the sacred right of the Republic of Cyprus to exist. I think this is the heart of the issue. Because if it were to recognize that, we could easily arrive at an agreement involving a CBM package, involving Famagusta, and the road to a better future for all Cypriots, as well as a better road, a better future for the peoples in the area, it would have been much easier. So I come back to the issue of what is taking place what is taking place with Turkey. And we understand power and the relative balances. Turkey is a strong country, it's a regional power which declares that it wants to be in peaceful and friendly relations with its neighbors. I think the case of Cyprus is one of the areas, it's one of the issues that disproves this Turkish objective. The EU and several countries and powers may convince Turkey to take a bold and brave step in the right direction, because I have no doubt a country cannot never be free in direct relation with it. So I think this is also an important step for Turkey. I do believe that despite the fact that things are difficult, that in the era of the 21st century, in an era of the interplay of ideas, in an era where we have witnessed change in a manner which surprised everybody, I think that this could be possible. Famagusta, I think, can serve broader objectives. It could break the ice between all sides involved. I think it would facilitate the relations between the two communities in Cyprus, I have no doubt. It would generate multinational, multi-dimensional benefits, not only in Cyprus but beyond, and it would also serve as a litmus test for the ability of Turkey to change. And I think that would be a step in the right direction. Politically, more often than not, it is the case that players stick to their positions. If Turkey finds the courage, with the persuasion of some of its powerful allies in the European Union and beyond, and understand to move on the case of Famagusta in a way that it would create a positive climate and it would lead to a Euro cooperation, I have no doubt that there will be progress in Cyprus, in the Eastern Mediterranean and beyond. And I think that's where we should concentrate. So my point is that while at the same time we keep an eye to a comprehensive solution of the Cyprus problem, we must not ignore the potential and the power of an evolutionary process, which it could lead to great effects. And I think this could be a feasible objective of the political forces in the Republic of Cyprus, as well as the European Union and other interested parties in the international community. I think if Turkey is allowed to play the whole issue in an antagonistic manner, I think things would become worse. There would be greater tensions. I'm finishing, Mr. Chairman. Greater tensions, and I think that should not be encouraged. I think that we are at a time when, with political courage and the right political moves, we can create great opportunities for all the parties involved. Thank you very much for your attention.
I'd like to go to our other parliamentary bits. I'd like to welcome Jim Sheridan, Member of Parliament for Paisley. Welcome. Now, passing on to Mark Stevens, who will help us look at this as an issue of human rights. And Mark comes to us with great experience in relation to human rights litigation. So, Mark, over to you.
Well, thank you very much. I'd like to begin by expressing my gratitude to a fellow lawyer and our Member of Parliament sponsoring today, David Burrowes, for this invitation to speak, and also to lobby and to the Famagusta People's Association. I know that David Burrowes shares, as me, neither of us have a dog in this fight, as it were. Neither of us are Cypriot. Neither of us have property in Cyprus or in Famagusta. But I think we share an innate sense of the injustice that has occurred. Now, my role today was really to wrap up and look at the comments made by the various parties. And I'm hoping that Mayor Galanos, who must be the only mayor of a foreign-occupied military base and its environs, I'm hoping that you will elucidate for us the political journey and the fundamental human wrong of the displacement by force of a civilian community. Something that really hasn't happened anywhere else in Europe since the Second World War, in East Germany, I think of particularly. Dr. Klearchos Kyriakides rightly reminds us of the history of this appalling human tragedy and the injustice. He also points out the ineffectiveness of the law in getting prompt redress for so many people, and also the fact of the multicultural nature of society now. I also think that Professor Theophanous rightly reminds us, at a time of impending economic disaster, as Greece is on the bus out of the euro, as Cyprus is having to intervene to support its third bank, with other countries suffering. At this time, Professor Theophanous, you've rightly pointed up the economic waste of a city in stasis, or as you would have it, deadlocked. A beach that is unreachable to all but a few tin pot generals from the Turkish occupying force. That certainly is unreachable by tourists. It's certainly an economic dead weight, is Famagusta. And I think that in human rights and international law, you rightly advert to foreign investment. And it's quite clear to me that nowhere in the world will you have, and there's some very good research being done by Oxford University and the World Bank about inward investment and regeneration, but it won't come from the big sovereign funds of places like Norway, of Singapore, of Kuwait, Qatar, even China or the Soviet Union or former Soviet Russia. It won't come until there is legal certainty. People will not put in money until they are sure that when they put their investment in, A, it is secure, they're going to get proper legal title, what they get they think they can buy, and secondly, they have an effective remedy which is enforceable by proper legal courts within an administration, and that those courts' judgments are going to be reciprocally enforced around the world. And of course, this brings me to the problem that we have, that 38 years ago, on the 20th of July 1974, we have a problem, which is that the invasion led the international community to leave us in a situation where they recognised only one legitimate owner of Cyprus, one lawful sovereign body, and that is the state of Cyprus. There is no recognition for the so-called TRNC, and it would be incompatible with the rule of law, with international law, that you can obtain territorial change through the force of arms or the threat of the use of force of arms. And any subversion of this would be a subversion of international law. It would also be involve a breach of the UN security resolutions. I'm thinking particularly of 541 of 1983, which was reaffirmed a year later in May 84, and that there have been 4 other reaffirming international resolutions of the UN ever since then. And so we have an intractable position, and it leads me to remind us of something which is slightly unusual, and we don't think of it in these terms, I think. But we have to remind ourselves that Northern Cyprus is part of the European Union. Northern Cyprus is part of the European Union. And the proof of that, if you will, and I'm reminded of it particularly as we have 3 academics here, one from Hertfordshire, one from Cyprus, and myself as the chair of the University of East London. We have 3 academics, and I was interested to note that increasingly people from Northern Cyprus are taking the benefit of a Cypriot passport so that their children can go, they can live on land which is stolen, they can work on land which is stolen in international law, for which no compensation has been paid, yet their children can take the benefit of a Cypriot passport and go to Scotland, for example, and study at Glasgow, Edinburgh, St Andrews, free of charge. Our children have to go there, and we pay £9,000 a year for the privilege. This, it seems to me, has a certain irony about it. And it does seem to me that there is a fundamental injustice and a fundamental wrong which requires putting right. So much for that in terms of what the lawyer had to say. We have, I think, to recognise that the EU is not becoming the attractive, or is no longer the attractive proposition that Turkey once thought it was. I think that its desire to join is probably withering on the vine. And as a result of that, the pressure that there's always been on Turkey to resolve things, certainly that the French have always put in play to ensure a resolution in a political dimension, has started to evaporate. The UN has moved on to other, less intractable problems. And so we're in a situation where Turkey has no incentive from a political perspective. We also have to recognise the reality of what is going on in Turkey, which is that there's a growing fundamentalism in Turkey, which is also going to militate domestically in that country against a political resolution. Which leaves us really with the one last opportunity, which is that the one that you posit, which is about economic reality, economic regeneration. Turkey needs economic regeneration, Cyprus needs economic regeneration, the European Union needs economic regeneration. I think the only hope for a legal solution is forced by the economic imperative. And it's there where I think that one must put one's efforts in order to get a just legal solution. Thank you.
And it finally reminds me to welcome and introduce Mayor of Famagusta, Alexis, who has appropriately the final word for the moment. Over to you, Alexis.
I'd like to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for sharing this meeting and what you are doing for Cyprus. I'd like to thank the organizers, the Famagusta Association, for keeping the problem of Famagusta alive. And I'd like you, my friends, that you are here today to listen to us after 38 years, and you still have the patience to dream and have the vision of the return to our town of Famagusta. I have to say that there are 9 refugee towns in Cyprus: Morphou, Kyrenia, Karavas, Lapithos, Lysi, Agathous, Kythrea, Lefkonikos. And about 180 refugee communities. What distinguishes Famagusta, which is the largest of the lot, it used to be almost the second biggest town in Cyprus before the invasion, and of course the most developing, is the fact that Famagusta is occupied by Turkish military troops. And the only case where there is a mention of Turkish occupation in Cyprus is in Resolution 550 of the Security Council of 1984. Nowhere else there is a clear mention of the Turkish occupation in United Nations resolutions. And this resolution 550 is a binding resolution of the Security Council, which was of course succeeded by another Security Council resolution concerning Famagusta, number 789 of 1992. There has been a failure of international law in Cyprus, particularly in the case of this beautiful town, now a ghost town. A failure of keeping international treaties, a failure of implementation of resolutions, a failure of successive Secretary Generals of the United Nations to do their duty. to keep faith to their mandate. When President Christofias wrote to Ban Ki-moon 3 years ago, requesting him to take steps to return the town of Famagusta as per these two resolutions, and before these resolutions you mentioned it, there was a high-level agreement between the Klearchos Kyriakides, again referring to Famagusta. Of course, the President did not publish the correspondence. Mr. Ban Ki-moon replied that Famagusta would be given back at the end, with the end of negotiations, at the end of the road with the solution. That was outside his mandate. His mandate said very clearly that he has to implement these resolutions. We gave priority of returning immediately to the town of Famagusta. But it's also a mistake of the international community and us that we have followed this effort of comprehensive solution, and we have not used the weapon, the tool of legality, to the extent that we should have done. Because at the end, unless you insist on the rule of law and the application of the rule of law and legality, negotiations will bring you nowhere. When the other part of the negotiations feels strong enough not to obey with international legality. So I think one of the mistakes we did in our wish to achieve a solution, and I think it was a general mistake under the circumstances, is that we focused on the bicommunal talks in the hope that with arriving at a solution on the bicommunal level, that would have solved everything else, including the withdrawal of Turkish troops from Cyprus, the limitation or let's say the stopping of the policy of illegal immigration, of settlement, and the respect of human rights. Unfortunately, that was not the policy of Turkey. The policy of Turkey comes very clearly in the book that Mr. Davidov wrote. And I invite you to read that book, because in that book, everything becomes very clear. He says that Cyprus has strategic interest for Turkey. The question of Turkish Cypriots is a secondary thing. And even if there was not a single Turkish Cypriot in Cyprus, we should have invented Turkish Cypriots for the interest of Turkey. So let us have no illusions. And if we have no illusions, and of course we should try to reach a bicommunal settlement, but I think the subject matter has changed. With the illegal immigration, the majority now in Cyprus are not Turkish Cypriots who are living. To be able to meet this kind of attitude towards Cyprus, the attitude of strategic interest in the area, we have to counter it with very clear and present thoughts from our side. And these clear and present thoughts say this, that we must increase the cost to Turkey of the continuous Turkish occupation of Cyprus. And how can we increase this cost? Small Cyprus, by trying to build any kind of alliances we can. I think the present improvement of relations with Israel is very important. I think that we should exercise, let us say, more influence in the United Kingdom and the United States. I'm afraid to say, with all respect and admiration I have to the British policies and the British role in the world, there is a kind of benign neglect as far as Cyprus is concerned, both from Britain and from the United States. A big interest in the world, but we have to focus there. Europe today is weak. Greece is very weak. Very correctly was mentioned that Europe is not so attractive at present to Turkey. And it's not such a big paradox. What otherwise we would have called the big paradox of the day, to have an applicant knocking at the door of Europe and at the same time occupying a European town. That's one of the biggest paradoxes in history. And yet we accept this paradox because Turkey is strong. Turkey appears to be able to control developments in the Arab Spring, appears to be able to control the routes of oil, of energy. Turkey is playing the game with Syria. So unless we have some very clear thinking of what we must pursue on the Cyprus issue, then I think we are losing our time. I agree with you, not because I'm mayor of Famagusta, it's because I have always this attitude towards Famagusta that I became mayor of Famagusta. 5 terms as member of Parliament of Famagusta. Famagusta is the key. Famagusta is a test of goodwill. Famagusta is a very strong card as far as Turkey is concerned. It's both a defensive but also an offensive card. Turkey cannot explain occupying a town like Famagusta. It's in a very difficult position. And we have to come out with constructive proposals that will make the position of Turkey untenable. One of these is a proposal we made, that United Nations surveyors enter the town and prepare a study of how to rebuild it. I think we can go a step ahead. At the time that we are warned and we are threatened, and I don't believe in this threat because it's not in the interest of Turkey, that Famagusta will be returned under Turkish Cypriot administration, which would mean, of course, the colonization of Famagusta at the end. We have to counter something with creative thinking and propose that the town of Famagusta and the port of Famagusta and the area around becomes a European zone, a free European zone, part of Europe. That's something that for Turkey will be very difficult to reply. And I think UK can be involved in this effort. If the whole area is declared the European area, and if we ask for more European intervention and stop playing a multifaceted big game in the area like we feel we are big players and playing with everybody and big friends with everybody, but go straight to what is in the interest of Cyprus, I think that we can be very effective. And I think it's high time to start thinking seriously of how to face the question of Famagusta, because if we don't move quickly, after 38 years, 2 generations are gone, Famagusta can be lost. There is an opportunity about Famagusta. We can present to the world a new metropolis in the area, a metropolis which can bring a lot of wealth and a lot of friendship, and can be a laboratory of goodwill between the two communities, and a laboratory of cooperation in the whole area, and the bridge as regards very strategic interest in the whole game of energy in the area. Famagusta can start that, but we have to be creative, and we must know what we want. And what we want is to use the card of Famagusta without any complex as a bridge for the solution to the Cyprus problem. I'd like to thank you. I think that I was kept within the 15 minutes.
Absolutely, yes.
And, well, thank you very much. A lot of other things we can say, but I expect we will have a very constructive exchange of ideas with our friends who are here today.
Thank you very much. That's one we've, surprising in many ways, in dealing with issues of Cyprus and involving politicians and academics and lawyers. We've kept within time, and we've given a lot of opportunity for discussion and questions, and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions. So I'd encourage people, when asking the questions, just to try and keep them as concise as possible, to have a question mark at the end rather than just a statement, and then we'll be able to involve the panel and others as well. So now over to you, Marina. Yes. And can I also welcome Angela, Member of Parliament for Hertfordshire.
Thank you, David. I wasn't going to say anything, but we seem to have mentioned the European Union so much that I feel like I should really just plug in and say a few things that are going on. First of all, the European Union is in turmoil. The euro, we don't know how long it's going to last. It's going to affect everyone. It's going to affect Cyprus as well. I was at a meeting before this, a tripartite European Scrutiny Committee, and we were talking about the different effects and how it's going to be. And one of the things I said was Cyprus is going to be at the back end of this, and I don't know how they will last in the euro. The reply was, well, they have the gas. That's not coming for 5 years, so don't wait for that too long. The other reply was, we have the Russian money. Well, that's not going to see it through. So Cyprus will have an economic problem. When I'm in Europe, one of the key words I use is under occupation, and I think we've got that message across. Even the most die-hard supporters of Turkey are accepting it. And the fact that Cyprus has the presidency in July and Turkey is not going to speak to Cyprus, is not going to speak about its positioning and how it's going to join, I think shows that Turkey is not fit to join unless it recognises all 27 states. Now, I do still think Turkey's interested. They're flirting around, they're constantly there, and they're constantly promoting themselves. So I'm not sure that I would say they're not interested in joining. The Famagusta and the and the Cypriot lobby have been quite successful in many ways. They've had a few wins, such as the written declaration, the petitions, the written declaration on missing persons. And the proof of this success is that they are hitting harder now, the Turkish lobby. For example, I'm a member of the high-level contact group for Turkish Cypriots relationships, and we've been put on hold. We're not quite sure what our future will be because they feel that we are too pro-Cyprus. Well, I don't think we are, but one of the things we were planning on doing was having all 9 mayors and the mayor of Klearchos, which is my village, and it's not going to fall behind, visited by us, and we were going to try and get their perspective. In addition to that, we were going to try and get into the cordoned-off zone on our next visit, but they put us on hold, so we are where we are. I am very concerned that the Turkish Cypriots are fighting back strongly, Turkey through the Turkish Cypriots, because the Turkish Cypriots are very divided as to the Turkish Cypriots who are pro-Turkey and the Turkish Cypriots who just happen to speak Turkish but are Cypriots. And they're becoming less and less of them, as you rightly said, as the occupying forces move in and you get more Turkish origin people. But I am very concerned about this suggestion that's floating around about Famagusta being opened up under Turkish Cypriot, under the auspice of Turkish Cypriot looking after it. That will be a very dangerous situation. I'm not sure how far it's got, if it's official yet, but if it does become official, it'll be another one of those tools that they will throw into the European Parliament and say, look, we've offered it back to them, they don't want it. But we all know that once Greek Cypriots move in there, they will not have freedom, and they will start direct trade, and I think that that's the end of it then. It's a very dangerous situation, and I would not like to see it. The best situation, of course, is under the UN, or under the EU. The EU won't do it, but under the UN, and whoever made the comments about jobs, humanitarian reasons, and the communities working together was 100% right. So maybe my question in a long way is, how true is this Turkish Cypriot opening it up under Turkish Cypriots, and how do you envisage it playing out? It's a very dangerous situation.
Yes. You see, in politics, one must always be prepared for the best possible and the worst possible scenario. Turkey many times have threatened and carried out their threats, and many times threatened and did not carry out their threats. Let me start with the last one. If you recall, during the time of the accession negotiations between the Republic of Cyprus and the European Union, at the time, former Foreign Minister of Turkey, Ismail Cem, was trying to bully the Republic of Cyprus and the Greeks in general by saying that there would be no restraint to the Turkish reaction if the Greek Cypriot administration in South Cyprus entered the European Union. Now, there was no Turkish reaction because at the time Turkey did not have to face only Athens and Nicosia. They were facing the European Union as a whole. Now, what I'm trying to say is that at this point in time, faithful to its policy of not recognizing the right of the Republic of Cyprus to exist, Turkey wants to make things difficult for Cyprus. Now, it's important for policymakers in Nicosia to make sure that this is prevented, and in order to prevent this, it must be projected as a European issue. This is the only thing that can stop the Turks, can stop Turkey from taking that step. If there is a reaction or an expected response on the part of the European Union, let alone the other members of the international community. I'm sorry to say that at this point in time, Greece is in such a mess that its leverage is minimal. Thank you.
Just lean forward.
Yeah, there always this danger, but I don't really believe that it will be in the interest of Turkey to do it. If they go ahead to implement this threat, that will coincide with the beginning of the Cyprus presidency. You understand that then, that instead of having an elegant presidency, which everybody talks about, then we will have one issue, Cyprus, and one issue, Famagusta, because it will be very clear that this is a ploy for colonization, inviting some people to go back to their homes, not homes, under what circumstances, in a town that will take about 5 years to start operating. It's very clear that they're playing with the resistances of the people, believing that there may be some people that they may want just to go in order to sell and live. But the best they expect to do with this proposal is to continue a kind of rift between people from Famagusta who would like to go and those who would not like to go under circumstances, playing with the poverty and despair of people that, of course, very rightly, after 38 years, would have expected our state to have done more things about the refugees. But in reality, it is against the interests of Turkey, because they violate clearly not only the two United Nations Security Council resolutions, they also violate the last European statement, the European resolution, which comes out very clearly, confirming the two previous resolutions. And the resolutions are very clear, that the town will be given back to the lawful owners through United Nations. That kind of implementation from their part will show contempt towards the Secretary General. The Secretary General has to come out. The 5 permanent members have to come out. So I'm afraid it's one of the threats of Turkey without exclusion. And of course we must have ready all our options and all our plans for any eventuality. But I don't believe that they are ready to do it. Another thing is, of course, if they ever do it, that would mean the end of the Cyprus problem, because that would be an effort from their part to recognize an illegal regime. They don't want Turkey, whatever they say, they don't want to end the Cyprus problem, because in a way they are captives, they are hostages of the Cyprus problem on the one hand, but on the other hand they hold Europe hostage to the Cyprus problem. It's a joint hostage situation, and this game they wanted to continue. That they can do anything, I'm prepared to see that, even miscalculations, because I believe that the present leadership in Turkey suffers from hubris. I believe that.
Can I just add to that? I mean, there are 3 parliamentarians here. We were all in Cyprus last week, and certainly conversations with Turkish Cypriot politicians that the proposal for the return of Famagustans under Turkish Cypriot authority is a serious proposal that's being discussed. And indeed there was a conference just last week, a high-profile conference in the north, looking at this very proposal and looking at the practicalities of it. And so it has got momentum and needs to be taken seriously in the sense that it's being talked about seriously. And it seems to be the motivation for it is based upon a political calculation, one in which that there's a view that it would be one that is welcomed by Famagustans, and so it's important that one of the very least of things from this discussion here is for it to be loud and clear whether it is not welcome, as simply that just getting back to Famagusta would be on its own basis welcome to Famagustans. Secondly, it's also based on a political calculation that will open up further support for a solution whenever it comes and is agreed by Cypriot leaders, that will act as a momentum for future referenda. And thirdly, an economic calculation that it would then inevitably open up for Republic of Cyprus ships to go in without penalties on the basis of Famagustans living in Famagusta. And so that's as I understand, the motivation behind it. Issues of human rights do not come in. to it.
Mr. Burrowes, just for information, the mayor and the municipal council of Famagusta unanimously we have rejected outrightly this kind of development. Not only because we think that there will not be a legitimate return under conditions of safety, but also we feel that this will goes against legality and will promote illegality, will take us far away from the hope of solving the Cyprus problem.
Yes.
Chair, Jason Theophanous, I'm the Vice President and Cyprus Secretary Team Coordinator of NEBOMAC. I'm also the Youth Officer of the Greek Cypriot Brotherhood. Let me start by saying I've lost my voice. It's not normally like this. I hope, like the refugees of Famagusta, my voice will return. And I like to say that what I say is in a personal capacity and not in my roles. I personally believe, as was mentioned I think by Dr. Klearchos, that the biggest problem we face, the biggest enemy, is actually ignorance, indifference and complacency, not only by Turks and Turkish Cypriots, but by people living abroad. And when I visited, I was with the chairman on a recent visit, and I saw for myself 3 examples of blatant ignorance of the issue. The first was in Asha, the birthplace of Dasos Papadopoulos, where we visited a graveyard. And I mean, I've seen bad graveyards in the north, but this one was, I mean, every tombstone was smashed, every grave was smashed open where the bodies had been taken out, and their watches and jewellery stolen. And we're with an interpreter, Turkish Cypriot, who was talking about reconciliation and about rebuilding, and he seemed sincere, but as he was speaking, he was standing on the grave, on somebody's tomb, which revealed to me not, he wasn't trying to insult, he was just ignorant and unaware of our faith. The second was when I went to Famagusta, I wanted to go to Salamis, and I went to the university campus because there were no signs to this site. And I was about 5 minutes away, but I didn't know where it was, so I went to the university campus and I asked about half a dozen students, where is Salamis? They all responded, Salamis the casino? I said no. Salamis the hotel? I said no. I said the ancient Greek and Roman ruins. Nobody had a clue. Eventually I found it, and there was 2 tourists in the entire place. The third occasion came when I went to the fenced-off area of Famagusta, and I ignorantly went right up to the border, clicking away with my camera. Of course, at that point, the Turkish guard was whistling and screaming at me, so I quickly ran. But what shocked me there is that there was a beautiful hotel, 5-star hotel that's been recently built right by the fence, and there were tourists everywhere. And it was amazing, the juxtaposition of these shelled-out buildings, like in the image, and right in front you have English, French, German tourists sipping on their cocktails right in the shadow of these buildings. They have no idea. And that's what I believe, and I want to see your views on this, that I think actually where we have gone wrong as Cypriots is we have failed to communicate what has happened to Cyprus to the outside world. We have failed to embark on an effective campaign with serious money. If we put that image in every underground station in London, if we put an image of an occupied church with the question why, 40 years later, in 2012, is this still happening, people start asking why. And people, the communities, international communities in Britain and America will demand from their politicians, like they have with the Arab Spring, you must act on Cyprus. And I think now, in the wake of the Arab Spring, it is the citizens of Britain and America and Europe who are the most powerful. If they get onto this issue with an effective campaign from Greeks, Cypriots and the Republic and Turkish Cypriots, then we can really make a difference. And I want to see if this was a view that was shared by the panel.
Please, yeah.
Thank you very much for this statement. I'm afraid that this is something that they constantly say in Cyprus, that Cyprus perhaps is one of the few countries that doesn't have a narrative. And that's why it has lost the moral high ground of the case. I mean, we have not invested in the importance of information, in the importance of having a communication strategy to put forward the major issues. And Turkey managed to project the issue, the Cyprus question, as a mere bi-ethnic problem where 2 communities do not get along, and above all, Greek Cypriots want everything we have wanted to share with the Turkish Cypriots. And I think this is part of the failure that we have not invested accordingly. Turkey has a story about what happened in Cyprus. It's perverted, but it has solved it. We don't have a story. And I'm afraid that each political party in Cyprus has 2-3 stories, even if they don't agree within the same party about what are the issues. And this is something that we must see and project the issue in a more coordinated and effective manner in Cyprus. And I want to say that sometimes the issue of projecting the right information, it must start not only in Britain, but it must start first in Cyprus, then in Greece, and then the rest of the world.
Alexis.
Very simply, I agree with Andreas. I think that while in defense contracts there are commissions, there are not many commissions as regards information. So there is not much interest. This is the kind of world we live. The other thing is that in Cyprus, after having such a tragedy from 1974, any other country in our place, any other people, they would have had a government of national unity. I mean, a country that lost 40% with the Turkish army inside and the settlers and all that, they should have had and have agreed to join forces to face this tragedy. Unfortunately, we never joined forces, so we fight very antagonistically each other, and the only thing that we care is about who sits in the chair. So when we have this kind of mentality and this antagonism, and everybody looks at this very strange phenomenon of the wonderful Greek character we have, the wonderful democracy that we have to fight each other and forget what's happening around us, then we arrive, the tragedy becomes bigger. And we never learn, and we continue. And we prove from morning to night that we are Greeks through our shortcomings and not through our good things.
Mark, just as an outsider, why this hasn't got a high priority as an issue of human rights?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that troubles me about this is the very fact that it hasn't got priority. There have been notable cases in the European Court of Human Rights. Loisidou, everybody in this room will be familiar with it. But there is no effective remedy. Mrs. Loisidou wins her case, and that should set a precedent for everybody. Now we're in a situation where cases are going through this administrative tribunal in a country that is not recognised. I use the word country ill-advisedly. But we have a situation where the law and the judges have been just overwhelmed. They have been unable to cope with the sheer number of cases filed in the European Court. And what they've done is they've said, well, we're going to prioritise other things, and so we'll go to some kind of administrative arrangements which are, to my way of thinking, suboptimal. They do not properly deal or address the fundamental human rights of individuals. These cases have been put into the legally too hard pile. And frankly, as a lawyer, I'm ashamed. There should be no legally too hard pile. This is about people's lives. People's lives were devastated by this. And the fact that it was 38 years ago shouldn't make any difference to anybody. They are, in fact, 38 years should have given more than sufficient time for everybody to have engaged in a proper legal process and got redress. And it's absolutely shameful that it hasn't. And I think that this is a real issue for the lawyers who have fundamentally failed the people of Cyprus and the people of Famagusta.
Can I just a very quick point on that? Far too many of the lawyers, particularly from the international organisations that have descended upon Cyprus in the past few years, have really acted as implementation officers. That was a phrase that was used by the Dutch legal profession to describe, if I remember correctly, the lawyers in Nazi Germany. They just did what they were told. They drafted legal instruments which implemented immorality. And the Annan Plan was exactly that. It was a legal text. Yes, it was a legal text, or a draft legal text, but it tried to enshrine institutionalised discrimination and other principles which are completely anathema to our way of operating in the democratic world. And to go back to Jason's point about ignorance in Cyprus, there is a great deal of ignorance, and the only way to address that is with education. Regrettably, and I'm not an expert on the education of Cyprus, but in some corners of Cyprus, people are taught people are taught what to think. They really should be taught how to think. That's the difference between authoritarianism and democracy.
Yes. Chairman, thank you. It's a question for Mark and for Klearchos. Start with Mark. Do you consider the continuing occupation of Famagusta and the deprivation of its lawful inhabitants to return to their homes to be a war crime? And if so, do you not think that one way to perhaps urge Turkey to do a little bit more to prevent that war crime from continuing is to perhaps look at prosecuting its current leaders as war criminals? That seems to be the current theme at the moment. And what do you think about that? And I'll ask that with the same question.
I think that it's a very interesting thought. I don't think it is a war crime, unfortunately. Crimes of war are very narrowly defined. I think it could come within an expanded notion of a crime against humanity. But where I think that the law perhaps offers the best opportunity is actually to hold responsible on a criminal basis those at the top of the chain of occupation and those that orchestrated the invasion and the continued occupation. And there's a principle in international law which was developed at the end of the Second World War called command responsibility. And command responsibility was brought in to enable the trial of Japanese generals in relation to the comfort women who were abused so cruelly in Southeast Asia. And they said, well, I never used a comfort woman. And the answer was, well, yeah, but your troops did. And you were responsible for discipline, and you were responsible for finding out what they were doing, and it was reasonable that you should have known what was going on. And similarly, it seems to me that there is a command responsibility. And one of the tactics which has not been used is to bring long-reach jurisdictional criminal proceedings against Turkish officers and their families and those at the top of the tree, not diplomats because they'll claim immunity, but actual people carrying out the occupations when they come to London, in just the same way that people went for Pinochet, just the same way that people went for Zippy Livni. Now, those two people got away and slipped through the hands because they were politicians, they were diplomats. But I think people who are military personnel have a much greater problem, and I think that's where you target. People always make the mistake of going too high. I think you go just a few rungs down. That's what they did at the end of the Second World War, and they were very successful.
It will be very interesting to see what happens with Mr. Asil Nadir. Now, he returned to Britain. He was a fugitive, but of course he's being tried for defrauding the British public, not defrauding the people of Cyprus that should have been done. But it's interesting the time he has returned, under what government he left and under what government he returns. And we are all very, very interested to see what's going to happen with British justice, the witnesses, and what else. I mean, his trial is very linked with what happened in Cyprus many years ago, when there was stolen property, stolen hotels, and there was atrocities took place, and some people took advantage. So everybody is very, very interested to see the outcome of this trial.
Well, I think we're all very familiar, if I may, Chair, with tax havens and people fleeing to tax havens like Monaco. I was in Monaco last weekend, enjoying the hospitality of many a tax exile. But, of course, what we have in the so-called TRNC is, in fact, an exile for crooks and brigands. So crooks and brigands across Europe can flee to northern Cyprus, knowing that they're safe from the European arrest warrant. And in a time of terrorism, that's got to be a matter of enormous concern, that there's a jurisdiction within civilised Europe that law, the long arm of the law, cannot touch you.
Yes, I can't, thank you. I can't claim to be an expert on international humanitarian law, but a pretty strong case can be made to assert that war crimes were committed by the Turkish armed forces in Famagusta in 1974. I have some photographs here which have been published by the Imperial War Museum, British Army photographs of the destruction of apartment buildings and other civilian targets, and that's clearly, in my view, a war crime. The snag is that the international community has chosen not to make this an issue for international criminal justice. There is, as you may know, an international criminal court in The Hague, but Turkey is not a party to the statute that underpins that tribunal. And it's also governed by a statute of limitations which helps protect countries like Turkey, unless I'm mistaken.
No, that is not retroactive. But Turkey is not part of it. Neither is the US, and neither is Israel, and neither is Pakistan.
That's a question as well. We'll take two questions. Yes.
Yes. I think another reason that we have to think about is I believe that we don't understand the rest of the world, and we also don't understand Turkey. There is an assumption that Turkey wants to be a member of the EU. In Holland, where I live, I spend quite some time speaking to Turks, and I assure you that they do not. They would like to have economic union with Europe, but they wish to have nobody controlling their foreign policy. And this is also one of the reasons they're not part of the ICC. Then I think we have to start thinking of ways to parallelize the Cyprus issue to issues which are European issues, so that you understand us more rather than crying for our problem. And I think that the Cyprus issue is a security issue. In the occupied area, there's absolutely no control of which settlers, which type of people Turkey brings to Cyprus. And Cyprus can be the window to Europe in an illegal manner for Turkey, and we have no control. Now, economic boycott can speak and is something that they understand. But even that, because Turkey is such a potential economic power, on the recent second round for the oil and gas in Cyprus, it is widely understood that some of the major companies did not bid because they have assets in Turkey, they're active in Turkey, and they were told that they should behave themselves if they wish to be in Turkey. So we have to start thinking different. And let me throw an idea to you. Famagusta is the place where Shakespeare staged Othello. Famagusta has St. Barnabas, one of the first Christian churches. So I think we should pitch Famagusta to be a cultural heritage for humanity worldwide, and then put it under UN and UNESCO to be rebuilt, to keep the identity of Famagusta, the historical and cultural identity, because although we dispute the title of deeds, what is there means something to the rest of the world.
Just have another comment here. We'll hear a response to that.
A couple of things, actually. One is that I never understood something talk about.
Speak louder, please.
Sorry.
If I may stand up so people can hear you.
I never understood why the EU took on this thing. You talked about there were too many hard cases, and so the refugees have to go to this IPS to claim for their property, and there's this enormous thing about people having to sell in some cases. They're leading wretched lives, and then others are accusing them of betraying. But it's the EU that did this to Cypriots. It's the EU that one had hoped for a better future that has allowed this to happen. That's one point. I just want to express how I feel about it. The second point is that somebody talked about we don't give enough we don't express enough, so people are in ignorance as to what has happened in Cyprus. But 2 days ago there was a meeting in Westminster Palace, and Simon Hughes referred to the Republic of Cyprus that is occupied as Turkish Cyprus. He is not ignorant. That is, there's a lot of appeasing Turkey in this country. My country is this country. I was born here. And I'm ashamed in some ways of the way that this country acts towards Cyprus and towards the tragedy that has happened in Cyprus. I think, making it expensive. Somebody talked about we must make Turkey pay, make it too expensive or whatever. There was a way with Famagusta in which all Famagustians should have been encouraged in some ways to go to this IPC, although I don't agree with it, but to have made it too expensive for Turkey within the only legal ways that we had that were given to us. And yet, the Cypriot government decided, no, this is not to be done. So again, you have this thing of ordinary people not knowing what to do. Where there was a means of making it expensive for Turkey, it was, no, you can't do this because it affects the solution. But what solution? I mean, what are they bargaining? What solution is there?
Okay.
Sorry.
No, that's fine, thank you. So we've got the two comments there. Just to pick up on any of those.
Yeah.
First of all, bringing into a wider field of culture. Yeah.
I mean, I think there's two things. One, I can understand the very understandable confusion between EU and Council of Europe, but actually European Court of Human Rights is it's all right, it's perfectly understandable. So actually it's the European Court of Human Rights, and they literally have hundreds of thousands of cases. They have many cases where people are being tortured and killed unlawfully, and if you set that against people who've lost their homes, tragic as it is, I think one understands why they have prioritised it. Current waiting list at the European Court is 7 years. So from a practical perspective, you can understand why they've taken that particular route. It is inappropriate, though, because the IPC is producing levels of compensation which are inappropriate. They do not properly and effectively compensate. That is the entitlement. In fact, in law, you are entitled to one of two things. You are entitled to the return of your land and a compensation to reinstate it to the state it was when you had it dispossessed from you. And you're also entitled to compensation for the loss of enjoyment and utility for the period. Now, there's no way that people are doing that, and they're also not returning the land. They're only basically giving compensation. So it's an ineffective remedy. I really like this idea about UNESCO. I think that this is creative thinking. It's the sort of creative thinking that you hope for that would go to UNESCO. Of course, the problem with UNESCO is that they're a pusillanimous UN organisation. They've already had their budget cut because they were rude to the Americans and they've taken their money away. So the chances of it happening, I think, are remote. But I think we should try. I mean, I think getting a listing for places like St Barnabas, I think is an absolutely spectacularly good idea. It is also one of the last refuges of outstanding natural beauty, and it's now undespoiled. It's been, if you like, undeveloped for 38 years. So perhaps we should also look at that. I had a client some years ago, and it puts me in mind of this, and forgive me for a small diversion if you would. He lives in Chelsea, in one of the most expensive roads in Chelsea, and opposite him was a bomb site, and on that bomb site had built a prefabricated home from the Second World War. And because he rather liked the fact that he was not living in a road which had another 4-storey house opposite him, he decided to have listed the prefab, and for years lived in this fabulous house with no problem of the view. And I wonder whether we shouldn't actually look at that issue as well and try and encourage settlement out of that as well.
Yeah, the only problem.
Just briefly, yes.
Yeah, the thing is, the initiative has to come from an independent, non-governmental, non-political movement. And we in Holland just established an NGO called Walk of Truth, where we like to protect cultural heritage in areas of conflict as a form of dialogue. Because if you try to do it after the government of Cyprus requested, it will be politicized, the Turks won't allow. If the Church of Cyprus asks as a legal owner, it won't be allowed. But if we, the people of Cyprus, walk next to UNESCO or UNITRA, we could restore that city. So maybe you can help us to find a legal means to do that. Thank you.
Yes.
You know, there is an American saying, too many chiefs, no Indians. We are all generals. We all have ideas, very good ideas. But when you come to the point of implementing, we are very poor in implementation. We have a diplomatic service. Where are our diplomats? The first people who have to promote the Cyprus issue must be our diplomats. I don't say that all our diplomats, but I see a great weakness. Traveling all around the world, 25 years as member of parliament, president of parliament, meeting people, there is an attitude that we should not bring up the Cyprus issue because it's a faux pas. We should not show the others that we have a sick child because it's embarrassing. So somehow, instead of pushing hard for the Cyprus issue, for the problem we have in Cyprus, we like to present the good side of Cyprus, the tourist paradise, the economic activity. Unfortunately, now the economy has gone away, so we lost that. When the Pope visited Cyprus, we didn't take him to see a single place. We didn't take him to see Famagusta. When Mr. Ban came to Cyprus, the most natural thing for us, we take him to see Famagusta and say, Mr. Secretary General, that's your responsibility. We have United Nations Security Council resolutions you must implement. What are you going to do about it? We don't do these things. So before we talk about the responsibilities of the guarantor powers of our friend the British, of the Europeans, of double standards, etc., we must look of what do we do ourselves for Famagusta, for Kyrenia, for Morpho, how much do we promote it, and how much do we somehow, we are happy to talk about our misery, but we don't do much to resolve it. So I think that one lesson we have to take is that we first, if we don't first care enough to do something, only to give advice, but not to act as soldiers to promote something, then we should not expect from others. I'm sorry, I'm not talking about the US suggestion. It was a very good idea to declare Famagusta as a cultural town. Of course, the fusilamenos is a very nice expression you used about UNESCO. You will not catch much ground. They will tell you that you know, they have their own terms, and it's outside the terms. They are not place where to hold events, etc. But it's a good idea to try it.
I think
the word you used was pusillanimous. That's another word.
I think that the proposal is not just simply going to the high level for agreement. It's also based around a movement of the people of Cyprus to of Famagustans and others to obviously own the issue, as you said, in terms of not just giving advice, but doing something. And that's something which on my visit last week I found very much in terms of issues of cultural heritage. That does seem to be a way of moving things forward. The other issue is that when the Minister of Europe, on his first visit to Cyprus, I made sure when he did, he went to Famagusta to see for himself what you're putting pictorial terms here. Yes.
Yes, 2-3 comments on what has been said. Very interesting. UNESCO international promotion of Famagusta as an international cultural city or something similar. Any form of mobilization of forces towards the cause of Famagusta and Cyprus is welcome. Point number 2, I would agree with my friend Alexis Galanos that we Cypriots are not doing what we should be doing. We are not maximizing. People abroad know what we don't want, but they are not sure about what we want. And this is something that we must focus and reassess. And we must not shy from really what we want. If we talk about the Republic of Cyprus, the re-establishment of its territorial integrity and independence and sovereignty, I don't think that's nationalistic or too much. It is by definition that each country should seek that, and that's part of its own self-respect. Appeasement of Turkey, yes, it is taking place, or it has been taking place. In the last few months, due to the hubris of Turkey, I think there is a chance that they may lose it. But again, I come back to the issue of we having a narrative And we mentioning that it's an aberration for Turkey not to recognize the right of the Republic of Cyprus to exist in the 21st century. A member of the European Union and a member of the United Nations. And the other thing, let me be a little bit cynic. You know, if you are not for me as a Cypriot, as a Greek Cypriot, I consider it a sacred issue, I consider it as a primary issue. But if I was not a Greek Cypriot, perhaps I would know about Cyprus, but it would not be very high in my priority, because there are, the world is full of places of conflict and suffering. Okay, the issue is that how intelligently we take it from where it is and we bring it to give it to a high profile and move forward with implementing our rightful objectives and rights. And I think that it's within the framework of what can be described as feasible.
And how we establish identity of interest with other concerned parties.
Exactly.
Sorry.
Exactly.
Just very briefly, just to bring in some more people, particularly further away from the panel, you're all participants, so some more questions. Just very briefly. We'll just take a round of questions, first Sir, and then yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Zen from Protopapas. We are sitting here in this very civilized place, talking about civilized ideals such as human rights and the rule of law. And I ask this, and I think it has been mentioned by the mayor. We are talking about these wonderful ideals, and Turkey, on the other hand, is talking with guns. Guns supplied by the United States and other members of NATO. And the mayor asks, why doesn't America help, or why doesn't Britain help? Why should they help? They have huge financial interests to protect. Why should they upset Turkey and lose their contracts by trying to force Turkey to find a solution for Cyprus? I'd like the panel to consider this, please.
Maria Kokinubeke, chairman of the Overseas Cypriot Maronite Association. Of course, we all want Famagusta to return Mr. Galanos, and we support you all the way under the circumstances you are referring to. But since there is a talk about human rights, and Klearchos mentioned Carpathia, I would like to bring to your attention there is also the Christian Maronite community, which is on the verge of extinction in the occupied area of Cyprus. Referring to the cultural heritage you have asked, we have advised the Archbishop of Cyprus as a consultant to do an NGO 3 years ago and tried to promote the issues of cultural heritage. But my husband, who is a member of the European Parliament, together with Dr. Kasoulidis, has secured 2 million last year for the rebuilding of the churches and mosques in the occupied and southern part of Cyprus, or Free Cyprus. And they have chosen 10 projects, 5 Greek Cypriots, 5 Turkish Cypriots, and the UNDP, because the money is going to channel through there, has started last week, I think 2 weeks ago, they announced they are going to start the projects. And another humanitarian issue that Mrs. Giannakoudaki, who works very hard on it, is missing persons. But my husband has been securing money for 6 years now. With Mr. Dimitriou previously, and now with Dr. Kasoulidis, every year is this money that supports the missing persons institute in Nicosia. Otherwise, this will close down. And it came 1.5 million last year, and I think Marina is exercising pressure to increase this, and some other related issues. So I think that there are people who love you, but it's us that we lack strategy and communication, how to approach these people and how to touch their hearts. Thank you very much.
Just one more. There's a hand. Yes, very bad. Yes.
Hi, my name is Rassos. I'm my father's village, which is in the occupied area of Famagusta. If we can't beat Turkey with an economic stick or with the human rights, surely the only possible way forward is for the political will to exist, to negotiate with Turkey to reach a settlement. And I'd like the panel to give their comments on how we can build that political will to do so. Now, how do we help build that political will?
Yes, I'm just reading here, Martin Luther King tells us that segregation distorts the soul and damages the personality. We have in Cyprus institutionalised discrimination and institutionalised irrationality. The process is it's secretive, there is no transparency, and the leaders of two so-called communities have hogged the limelight. Where is the Maronite representation? Where is the Armenian representation? Where is the Latin representation? Where are the Filipino representatives? There's a huge community of Filipinos living in Cyprus. There are 60,000 Brits living there. The peace process is defective in procedural terms, but the substance is institutionally irrational as well. What they're trying to negotiate there is a settlement under which the north, and we're north of the river here, the north becomes institutionally Muslim because Turkey is defined as a Muslim under the 1960 Constitution and the 1923 Greek-Turkish Convention, and the south becomes institutionally Greek Orthodox Christian because that's how a Greek is defined. This is completely anathema to European Union norms and values. Round the corner in Whitehall, there are German and French and Dutch citizens who are working in Whitehall departments and they're exercising their rights under European Union law. The idea that you'll have a carve-up of places in the public sector or in ministerial offices on racial and religious lines is completely contrary to our way of operating. But because of the shadow of the gun, because of this principle that Martin Luther King has articulated, everybody in the island, regrettably, has become enslaved by this way of operating. And I've just read an excellent new book about Mustafa Kemal Atatürk by a professor at Princeton University, Professor M. Sukru Hanioglu. It's called An Intellectual Biography of Kemal. And he writes that, like Rousseau, Kemal considered the principal aim of a republic not to assure individual liberty, but to give expression to the general will. And like Machiavelli, he thought that a true republic should pursue national strength, even at the expense of individual freedom. We, in the democratic liberal West, believe in individual freedom, even if it sometimes upsets the state. And regrettably, in that part of the world, because of the centuries of history, it's the other way around. The interests of the state should prevail over the interests of the individual. And unless the culture changes, there's no way that we'll see a settlement of the Cyprus question. I regret to reach that cynical and rather negative conclusion, but that's what history and philosophy and experience tells us.
With it, you provide the opportunity of cultural change.
Yes.
Yeah. Any other comments? We've got some three different points there. Any others? Yes.
Yes. 2 points. In relation to the issue about human rights on its own may not do it, perhaps you have a point. But I think Cyprus has to offer a lot to its partners. It's not only a headache. It's not, our partners should not care about the Republic of Cyprus and promoting its objectives because only of human rights, although I do not underestimate that chapter, but I think there are vested interests. Let me put it this way. We forget that throughout times, the Eastern Mediterranean has been a geostrategically and geoeconomically important area. It is today, it's energy routes, meeting place between East and West, and so on. The Republic of Cyprus is situated in such a way where it can have a modest but substantive constructive role in projecting the EU and the West value system in the broader areas because of various reasons. First of all, Cyprus does not have an imperial past. It has been a victim of imperialism. Yet it's a member state of the EU which shares a value system which, if exported in one way or another or help to communicate that, it would serve broader interests of the West. Okay. Second, I think the politics played by Turkey, in the long run, they cannot sustain even Western interests. I mean, let's take the issue of Turkey. It is not logical for Turkey to demand what it demands for 100,000 Turkish Cypriots in Cyprus and to deny fundamental minority rights for 15 million Kurds in Turkey. So I think if you also take the issue of consistency and the issue of what Cyprus can project in the broader area, even interest-wise, in addition to the energy issues, I think there is more to it, and it's up to us, citizens of the Republic of Cyprus, to rediscover that and project it. We haven't done it in an effective manner, either inside or outside.
I'd like to comment on that very, very shortly. What you would like, what I think you are saying, Andreas, and I'm adding to that, is that we do not have the luxury in Cyprus of any ideological blindness. We have to look what is in the interest of Cyprus and what kind of alliances we can build based on strategical choices that we should make, and we should have some kind of procedures through which we can arrive at strategical choices based on the location of Cyprus and the geostatistics. We cannot afford to have, let's say, big ideological battles that you can see in much bigger states, and of course we cannot afford to go back to 1917 or some other kind of regimes that the Cyprus problem anyway will not allow us for such experiments. Therefore, what is lacking is an approach which will be based on the interest of Cyprus and the interest and the alliances we should build in order to increase pressure on Turkey for Cyprus to survive. And what we should seek is where we find identity of interest of other players in the international scene, so through this identity of interest to arrive at a policy that can help Cyprus to get out of this imbroglio we are now.
Okay, we'll just have a final round of questions. Just the very back there. A bit louder, please.
I came here because I saw the advertisement from Tragedy to Opportunity.
Yes.
And we're not here to solve Cyprus' problem because I don't think we can.
Yeah.
So I'd like to know what you have to say as a part of the MP group and the United Kingdom. What are they doing to, as they're standing as guarantor to Cyprus, what they're doing to open up the pilot scheme of the return of Famagusta to the EU?
I'll answer that in a moment. Just here. Any other questions, please? Yes.
I think what I would say is linked to what this gentleman said.
Yes.
This country prides itself on being a democracy with an ethical stance toward all people in the world.
Yes.
Now, are there any British MPs who would be able to stand up in the British Parliament and speak for Cyprus and perhaps propose sanctions against Turkey, trade sanctions or economic sanctions, to put pressure on it to remove its troops from the island, to allow Cypriots to go back to their homes, to repatriate their settlers? Britain puts no pressure on Turkey at all.
Okay. Yes.
I heard with great delight the comments that everybody has made, but what worries me most seriously is what was said about Turkey has lost the incentive of wanting to join the EU as being something that could motivate it to make concessions. So my one question further to what was already asked is what you, as our friends, the MPs within the UK Parliament, can do to bring pressure to bear upon the British government to align itself with what the EU has already voted for.
Okay.
Return of Famagusta. And if that does not happen, that Britain should lead the way in the EU to seek for the EU to block Turkey's desire to become a non-permanent member of the Security Council. Because that would force the British government and the US government to actually ally itself with what is, has already been described as being the just thing to do. And if that does not happen, then sanctions can be imposed by the United Nations.
I'm hoping because soon I'll be saved by the division bell from answering that. And the privilege of being chaired usually is I rely on the panel to have to answer all the questions. So, but yes.
Back of the camera.
Theophanous, coordinator, Lobby for Cyprus. The title of today's seminar is Famagusta, From Tragedy to Opportunity. And I think the word opportunity is fundamental. And there are so many players on the international community that are important in the equation. You have the US, the United Kingdom, you have Europe, you have Turkey, and you have the Turkish Cypriots. What more convincing do we have to do, and how, in order for this ghost town of Famagusta to be returned to us?
Okay, I think we'll just hear just a final word from the panel, and then I will respond to the question in concluding the meeting.
Yes, I was a bit negative earlier, and I should have finished it on a positive note. Of course, when you have the way forward is to have a bottom-up process with transparency, everybody included, and try and find a settlement from that process. But you're right, we didn't say enough about opportunity. I've always thought this is a very wild idea that Sir Humphrey round the corner would have nightmares over because of the problems it would create. But the fundamental British interest in the Decalia sovereign base area is really Ayos Nikolaos, the signals intelligence centre. They're interested also in Akrotiri for other reasons. But and I've written about this, wouldn't it be nice if Decalia garrison, which is really largely surplus to requirements, could be transformed into a university campus? Not just for the purposes of the island, but for the purposes of the region, especially now that the Arab Spring is developing. It's so important that British values, good British values, the rule of law, the principles of justice and ethics are entrenched in that region. And I would suggest that this is just an idea, that the fate of Famagusta could in some way be linked to the future of Decalia garrison. But let's use these places for good moral purposes to do with education, sport, commerce, heritage, art, culture, things that can bring people together on the island and in the region. So I would throw that into the picture as well. Let's think about how we can use Decalia garrison.
Okay, in terms of the positive opportunity?
I think there are a number of opportunities. There are still legal opportunities which I think need to be pursued. There are still political opportunities, and I would say particularly this country, Robin Cook, started an ethical foreign policy. David Miliband took it one stage further, where he identified certain countries which were going to get special attention from the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. Now, they do an annual report. Cyprus is not involved in that, and perhaps some of the lobbying in this particular room...
Human rights report.
Human rights report.
It's just been published.
It's just been published, absolutely, Lancaster House, about 3 weeks ago. And that report is an incredibly good report. It's a powerful report. They're not the only country that do it. Virtually the USA does it as well. So all of these countries can be encouraged to include it. The third thing, I think, which sort of flows out of that is that the UN does triennial reviews in relation to each country on the planet. Turkey's triennial review is coming up. Now, it is appropriate for people to identify, particularly academics and lawyers, to identify human rights abuses and to brief those people who are going to be the examiners of Turkey's human rights records, so that we can read into the record of the UN what it is that they are abusing, and in that way hold them up as a pariah state. The last thing I would say is in relation to weapons which are used in the so-called TRNC. Every country that sells weapons has to have an end-user certificate. If the United States are going to sell weapons to Turkey, they must give them a Turkish end-user certificate, not a Cypriot end-user certificate. And if those weapons are used in a state which is not recognised by the UN, that is a breach of UN regulations, and it's an action which can be taken in the domestic courts in the United States of America.
Very briefly.
I find the title of this event today, From Tragedy to Opportunity, as a realistic approach. It is difficult, but I think it is feasible. We need to enhance the level of politics and of the political structures in Cyprus, pinpoint what we want and work at it. And again, I think that the issue of Famagusta, under certain circumstances, it can be promoted utilizing both the economics of it, the human rights of it, the legal framework, and so on.
That's great.
Is there a more touching thing in the world today than a ghost town? Anybody who knows about Famagusta is bound to fight for Famagusta. It's an international, a universal issue. The thing is that we have not really promoted it. We have not created the audience. Famagusta is waiting for the audience. Now, opportunities. Opportunities are always there for those who seek them. But how much do we seek the opportunities we have? Famagusta is an opportunity for the whole Cyprus issue. I would say that the international community may have not done enough on the Cyprus issue. But the big question is, have we done enough? How credible are we in Cyprus? What kind of picture we present to the outside world to make us credible, to be able to seek these opportunities? I'm afraid to say that the picture of unity and the picture of what we want or what we do not want and the whole mixture of things is not really promoting these opportunities. So if we want to change something and to seek opportunities, we must put our house in order to be more credible outside and use Famagusta and a lot of other things, like the destruction of our cultural heritage, which is European heritage, in order to promote the Cyprus issue. I'd like to thank the organisers again.
Just in concluding, to firstly thank all the panel for their contributions and for everyone attending, and to answer the question about what are we as members of Parliament doing about it, and I say this as a cross-party concern for the issue of Famagusta, and yes, there are parliamentarians who have stood up in Parliament and continue to stand up on these issues that are issues for Cyprus, but also, as we've heard today, issues of human rights and issues that should affect us all and be of concern, not least to Britain as guarantor power. What directly I would say is that the case for the return of the fenced-off area of Famagusta in Cyprus to lawful inhabitants and owners has been made well today. It's a case that's been made for the last 38 years. We've heard it's been made today on a historical basis, on an economic basis, on a political basis, on a human rights basis, on a cultural basis, well made. And that's something which has been timed for 38 years, but even more so as we hear the talk stalling, as we hear talk of a Turkish Cypriot-owned solution to this. But it's something which we do take very seriously in Parliament, and seminars like today help us take it ever so much more seriously. We, as an all-party parliamentary group, the officers have written to the Prime Minister, and a letter has gone to him saying that the town of Famagusta on the east coast of the Republic of Cyprus was overrun by the invading Turkish forces in August 1974. The Greek Cypriot inhabited Hertfordshire section of Famagusta was then sealed off and has remained so for 38 years now, looted, uninhabited and decaying with the passage of time. As officers of the Cyprus All-Party Parliamentary Group, we'd like to bring to your attention the continued deprivation of basic human rights, the recent Turkish and Turkish Cypriot newspaper reports that the sealed-off section will be opened up into Turkish Cypriot administration, and the declaration indeed made by Turkish Cypriot businessmen and professionals on October 2010 that the return of Hertfordshire's legal inhabitants under UN supervision and the opening of the Famagusta report under EU supervision will act as a catalytic effect, creating synergy for comprehensive settlement. We've asked the Prime Minister to note the existence of UN Resolution 550, UN Resolution 789, the European Union written declaration adopted by the European Parliament in February 2012, which again calls for the return of Famagusta. And finally, members of Parliament have called upon the British government as a guarantor power of Cyprus's independence to reaffirm most strongly its support for those United Nations Security Council resolutions and the European Union Declaration, and secure Turkey's cooperation in the opening of Hertfordshire and under the UN administration. That's something we have called on the Prime Minister to respond to. We will obviously be publishing that response, and we'll do all we can as parliamentarians to, yes, make that case for Famagusta. That it's a case that is not one that is just a Cypriot case. It's one that is a matter that should affect us both here in this country and internationally. And that's something which I've heard well made today. It's been made for many years. It's been made to us individually by the Famagusta Association, by thank for this meeting, and also by the lobby for Cyprus also, who continue to make that case. We need to make that loud and clear. Make it also very clear to your members of Parliament that represent you. So this is an issue not just by those friends of Cyprus who have stood alongside you for many years, but by many British members of Parliament to say that this is a priority for the British government and for the international community. Can I thank you all for attending? You'll shortly hear a bell, which will mean that we'll have to rush off to vote, and shortly you'll have to go too. Thank you very much.